Sunday! From the Race Lane 72 US 30 Dragster, the Coca-Cola bottle of Chicago Land presents the Mr. Chevrolet USA Super Dual Bike Car Showdown. From Pennsylvania, it's three-time national champion Jungle Jim Lieberman. From Dallas, Texas, Martin Martin's Drag-On Vega. From Alabama, the bold one, Bobby Wood. From New Jersey, Bruce Weston's fantastic USA 150.
Well, you know what that means? It's Wednesday night.
That is awesome.
Yeah. Well, and tonight we have Andy Wood instead of Professor P. Professor P is going to be taking a break for quite a while, and he's going to do some car shows and stuff with his kids while he can.
Don't blame him.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, this the Wednesday night Tech Talk gets to be kind of daunting because it comes every Wednesday, no matter what. So, yeah. So I invited Andy to come along, and he was more than happy. So
glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I guess the big ticket on your list, Andy, would be you were just you had a sneak peek at the Edelbrock factory where they're making the VRS carbs.
Yes.
Do they do like all the carbs there at that one plant?
Yes.
So like the AVS and the AVS2 and all that's still there as well?
All that is still there. I actually I'm going to be doing another video of the rest of the plant tour.
Okay.
I had so much footage, it would have been like an hour-long video.
Editing an hour-long video is a daunting task.
That's not my cup of tea. So, but the cool thing is I went there expecting to get a scoop on, the carburetor, which I did. But for me, the cool thing was the people who actually work there. There's a story within the story.
Oh, really? So are they like car people that work there?
Well, I've been in manufacturing, building Freightliner trucks for 26 years. And when I go to that place, these people love what they do. They have a passion for what they do. And it's unlike anything I've ever seen. And so really the untold story is the people behind the carburetors.
Huh.
If that makes sense. You know what I mean? In this day and time.
Right. I mean, it's a different thing when you go to work and you just do the daily grind.
Right.
But when you go to work and you absolutely love what you do, is something completely different. Right.
That is everything.
And no longer is a grind.
And I pretty much, me and my brother, we had free reign of the place, and I got to talk to people, interact with them, and that was super cool. But yeah, the VRS.
Oh, you like it better than the Holly?
Let me put it to you this way. If I had a way to describe this carburetor, this is the final evolution of the 4150.
Okay.
That's how I view this carburetor. It's everything that the 4150 should have been all along.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, the 4150, the Holly 4150 has been around since I want to say late 50s, early 60s, right?
57.
Okay, and so it's about time this thing had an evolutionary step up. I mean, I know there's a lot of companies that would make what you would call Band-Aid fixes, right? Where you'd make a metering block for them, and that had newer and more updated things where you could change out air bleeds and stuff like that.
But fundamentally, it's still the same.
Right. So, but now this carburetor is all of that plus some, right?
Yeah, and it's when you take, for instance, the main body. The one thing that I've never really liked about a 4150, and I've never heard of this happening, but the base plate attaches to the main body, right?
Right.
Well, that means you have exposed screws to the inside of the intake that could come loose and go down to the engine.
Right. Yep.
I've never heard of it happening, but the new VRS has a Dominator style main body where the base plate and the main body is all in one.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes it simple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
See,
no
I've always,
exposed hardware from the bottom side of the carburetor. See, that's something that no one talks about.
yeah. Well, those are one of the things that like, see, quadrojet carburetors are like my thing. I like to do those.
Yeah,
But they have screws on the bottom as well, and I always worry about them. I Loctite them, and I
yeah.
put the washers on them, the lock washers, so it won't really back off. And I've never really had any back off before, but I could just see the kind of catastrophic failure you would have if you did suck one of them suckers in.
Well,
Because a Phillips head screw, well, one, generally the screws are made out of something a lot harder than the material that they're in.
mm-hmm.
And then two, it's big enough where it could actually slide past the valve and just absolutely destroy a cylinder.
Oh yeah,
So
I've seen what something like that could do.
let me we'll run through and greet everybody
All
here.
right.
Yeah, well, first was you, asking Snowman, you got your ears on, and in reference to the picture, I'm assuming that I put up there. Then John Wilburn, Bruce Cultgen. I don't think I've seen Bruce in here before, but I'm glad to have you. 38 POS Racing, Fab Race Mod Repeat from Northeast Dragway. That's Chris Cox, who runs the Speed Oasis Speed Shop out there in Chesapeake. Clayton's Toolbox, Rick Salmon, Colleen Tebow. We got our friendly neighborhood Buick Smith is in here, and Mopar's Mustangs and Minivans. We got NSB Custom Cars, so the boys down at New Smyrna Beach are in here.
Heck yeah, Linko Dart for the win.
Yeah, the Linko Dart. That's right. Tall Garage, so Ken is here. Let's see, Aunt D. I don't see anybody else that's. Oh, Clint Street Machines in the house. And Dust Devil Garage. D150. Scarlet the Four-Eyed Cuda. And I think that's it. I'm up to speed here. But D150 already has a question, I guess, or a comment. He says, I have used Holly 4150 double pumper for years and bought a VRS 750, and I'm pretty impressed so far. Works great out of the box.
Yeah, that's to me. I think that's the impressive part. Is like the people that I've talked to put them out right out of the box, and they work really well.
Huh.
And that's a testament to the folks that designed it and the calibrations that they've used in the metering block, and it's a whole combination of things, really.
Okay. Well, what I've heard, that's not the first time I've heard that pretty much whatever you use it on, you pull it right out of the box and stick it on there, and it's really, really close to begin with. So it
Yeah.
means they've done their homework, right?
Well, look at what Professor P did with his Slant 6. He has a video where he took and put a VRS on the Slant 6 that just came off of a 600 horse engine on the
Right.
dyno, and that thing drove up the street just fine.
Oh, that's saying a
It's
lot,
crazy.
because I mean,
That's
most of the
crazy.
stuff you get right out of the box, especially if you're an oddball kind of, you got oddball stuff, right? Like all my junk always has to be adjusted, because nothing's right ever. Now, if a VRS, you can throw that on there and it makes a huge difference. That's going to be a big game changer for tuning, because you're already in the ballpark.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing. I think 90% of the people, they really won't have to do anything. It's only us gearheads that like to chase the rabbit all the way down the hole.
Every horsepower counts, right?
Yeah, that's where all that extra stuff comes into play.
Right. Yeah, especially like when you're talking air bleeds, because then you're going to be able to get the thing to run and idle correctly, and it have drivability would be so much better.
Well, a lot of people have this misconception that it's carburetors is about airflow, when in fact it's about making sure that the fuel is metered properly to go along with that airflow.
Right. Yep.
You know.
Well, it all boils down to the correct amount of fuel across the venturi, right?
Yeah.
So with you have this right amount of air, right amount of fuel, and it really and you had told me this before when I was screwing with that. I got that big 950 double pumper I put on my super stock motor.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Do you think it's going to be too big?" And you're like, "Nope, it's probably going to be pretty close as is out of the box."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Why is that?" And you said, "Because it's a 950 carburetor. Once you get it dialed in for a 950, it's pretty much the same no matter how much air you draw through it."
That's right.
Yeah. So, let's see. Yeah, John Wilburn is agreeing. He says all those screws, even on the throttle plates, scare me if I think about them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always, I don't know if you ever took apart a quadrajet or screwed with one of those before, but the screws down on the throttle
I
blades.
use it as a doorstop, but yeah.
Well, the screws on the throttle blades are swedged from the factory, so they can't back out.
Yeah.
So when I rebuild one and I replace those screws, because you got to grind them off to get them out because they're swedged. When I put the new screws back in, I end up swedging the end of them.
Yeah.
Well, I just heat them up, get them pretty warm, and then just squeeze them with a pair of vice grips, and it swedges them down pretty good.
That's a pretty cool tip.
Yeah, they're not going to back out on you. It's just you got to cut them off, huh?
Since you're in the quadrajet world, have you ever heard of a fellow named Dean Oliver in quadrajets?
No.
You haven't?
Huh.
So I'm building this small block Chevy that we're getting ready to put on the dyno, and we're going with a quadrajet. Can you imagine me on the dyno with a quadrajet and not?
No.
I can't either, but I'm going to. I'm getting out of my comfort zone. So, but Dean Oliver, he's pretty well known in like the stock eliminator classes.
Okay.
He's big on the class forum racer or class racer forum. Yeah, that's
okay.
it. And so he's built a carburetor, but the thing about it is, I don't know if he's sending me any other hangers to go with it to try on the dyno if I need them or.
Well, hey man, I just happen to know a quadrajet guy, and I got every hanger known to man. I got springs and I got metering rods and the whole 9 yards. So,
well, I definitely need to get up with you before I get on the dyno.
Huh. Well, what is this small block Chevrolet? Is it pretty hairy?
Yeah, it's a 408. It has an AFR competition series heads on it. You know, the CNC ported. It's got a custom, very small Mike Jones hydraulic roller. And I'm porting a Holly Street Dominator intake for it and putting the quadrajet on it.
Okay.
And so we're going to dyno it. And we've got it dressed out like an old GM Target crate motor.
Right. The black
all
ones.
Black.
Yeah.
It's got the 350 decal on the valve cover and all that good wrench.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so the magic behind the quadrajet, unlike all the other carburetors out there, the magic behind the quadrajet is vacuum signal, right? Yeah. And the more vacuum signal you have, the better it actually meters fuel. But that spring, just like on the Carter AFBs and then the Edelbrock series carburetors.
Yeah.
You have a power piston that controls the big hanger that moves metering rods up and down for each individual primary, right? And that's the same thing inside a quadrajet, except for it's like 1/3 the size.
Right.
And that spring under there is the magic behind the whole thing. You got to get the spring right so that it brings the metering rods out of the jet as quick as possible. And that 408 motor, the good thing is it should make plenty of vacuum. Even with the hydraulic roller, you said it's fairly small, right? So
it's small. It's small.
Yeah, it'll probably make a good vacuum signal.
24 at 50, so yeah.
Well, yeah, I can give you a hand there if if you're absolutely lost, just give me a call and I'll.
I will call my quadrijet guy. Dial a quadrijet man. One.
All right, sorry about that. Let's see here. Buick Smith says the newest carb I bought is one of those Holly Street Demon 3-inch barrel. Well, it's a 3-barrel. It's a 3-barrel. That's
It's
650.
actually like a new version of a thermoquad, and it has a single butterfly in the rear.
Right, and I don't think they still make those new though.
Oh, really?
No. I think those were all made like in the 70s.
No. The Barry Grant repopped them. not too
Really?
long ago.
A
Mhm.
3-barrel, huh? I didn't see that.
They call it the goggle valve.
The goggle
So
valve
it
because it's
looks like-
round.
Yeah, it looks like a pair of goggles.
Huh. Well, I just know the big barrel Hollies that they used to have had like that big blade that looked like the throttle blade on the Cobra Mustangs from
Monoblade.
the monoblade, the big sucker.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so John Wilburn's saying that Professor P says all the circuits crosstalk as to meter fuel better. I'd say Holly will up their game over the VRS, hopefully. I don't know if there is I don't know if you can one up this carburetor, honestly.
Look, and I'm just being a realist. You can see the writing on the wall where the other company's going, where Holly is going. They're putting a lot of money in their fuel injection. I know that they're still manufacturing carbs, but are they willing to invest that money to re-up the carburetor? And I don't think so. They already have the XP Holly, and it's really good.
Well, I doubt that there is anybody going to chase the carburetor that much further. That's what I'm getting at. I don't think there's
Right.
really much left to wring out of it.
Well, and I think that's where I really applaud Edelbrock. I mean, who comes out in the 2020s with a redesigned carburetor for this century? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It takes a lot of money, a lot of R&D to do that.
Well,
So-
look, it's taken 70 years for them to update the Holly, essentially 4150 series carburetor.
hmm
So, I mean, it would probably be another 70 years before anybody can think of something outside the box that needs to be added to the carburetor.
I won't have to worry about that.
No, I'll be dead.
Be gone.
Yeah. Let's see. Aunt D says, I pulled several used carburetors apart that were missing throttle plate screws. Always wonder if they were sucked in or lost on a workbench.
Makes you wonder.
Yeah, especially if you get the engine that goes with, like, oh man, oh no, you know.
Well, here's the thing. You pick up a swap meet carb, right? You put a kit in it. That carburetor's 50 years old. You don't know if someone's had those screws out of the throttle blades or not. And unless you actually look at them and check to see how tight they are, I mean, there's a possibility that something could go wrong. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's
Yep.
a suede screw, and once you take it in and out a couple times and get those threads loose, I don't know.
Well, Buick Smith says it seems the VRS would tune a lot like the Weber downdrafts, and I think it's actually working. When you're talking Weber downdrafts, any of the Weber carburetors, they don't work, together. They actually work independently, each individual carburetor. And that's where you'd come up with the variable air tune deal. Okay, every cylinder is the same. And then once you got every cylinder the same, then you try to set the fuel the same, right? The VRS, it sounds like it's talking amongst, well, it's not talking, but it's sharing vacuum signal. It's sharing Venturi air information across each individual barrel and trying to even it across. It's
Well,
kind of what I'm getting from this.
Here's one thing that I do know. Like a typical 4150 driving on the street with a wideband O2 meter, and you go through the gears just driving normally, right? Every time you shift gears, the carburetor will go lean for just a split second before the carburetor will stabilize again. Now you can't feel that in the seat of the pants driving it, but you see it on the meter. Okay.
Okay.
And Shane was telling me, because he's got a wideband, he said the thing that really impressed him is there was no drop when you have a drastic change in RPMs, and I can't wait to see that because that's something that you just really can't tune around.
Right. I wonder if it's just happening so quickly that the carburetor can react so quickly.
Bingo.
Yeah.
It's taking care of business.
Right. Let's see. D150 saying Just Mopar Joe did a video on a Moroso fuel log that has a return to the tank instead of deadheading with a Holley regulator. Is this a way to save the Holley style pump or make it live longer?
It'll definitely live longer.
Yeah. Whenever you deadhead it, deadheading's not good on the pump at all. Right? Because all that strain is technically right there on the veins of the pump. And when you have the system fully flowing all the time at, say, a regulated pressure, that pump will always live longer. One, because it hasn't having to fight that deadhead, right? It's just fighting the basic fuel pressure that you've set it at.
That's right.
And then the other thing is, as the fuel flows across that pump, it cools the pump. So it will definitely live longer. When you deadhead it, that fuel just stays stationary, and then the fuel starts to heat soak from the pump. Let's see. Dean Stevenson's asking who's Captain Thermoquad. That's a good question.
We need a Captain Thermoquad.
Let's see. Max Wedge Dick Dastardly is saying, Andy, you should put 2 quader jets on your tunnel ram.
Whoa. I don't know about that. I mean, that might be cool to look at for 10 seconds. What do you think about that, Dallas?
I think it'd be really hard to tune that thing.
I think it would be too.
They're already known as a quadribog when you put them on just one, right? And really, the only reason that they bog like that is the spring for the secondary air door will start to weaken, and so then the door will come open too soon. And when it comes open too soon, because the rear barrels are so large, you have such a pressure drop that you end up with a bog, because what happens is the air flowing across the venturi is giving you your fuel, and when that door comes open, you have a pressure drop to nothing, so the fuel isn't added because there's nothing moving across the venturi.
Got the air, but the fuel isn't moving yet, so something got to give.
Yep. Let's see. Rapid Transit Garage says, I have PTSD from working on and sinking the 4 carbs on his CB750 Honda. Yeah. So, let's see. Clint's Street Machine saying, question, do I have to be the guy to ask about the Predator carb? Well, the Predator carb that's Uncle Tony's buddy built that carburetor, I guess, and he was kind of a weird dude, apparently. But the Predator, I believe, is a variable Venturi carburetor. Mm-hmm. And so they're completely different. The Venturi would change in size based on load. Yeah. So that's a
pretty neat deal, really. I just couldn't get over just having a simple box on top of the motor.
It looks cool.
It does.
The logo used to have like that flying eagle or hawk or whatever it was. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see. Michael Schmidt saying, how about adding direct connection for nitrous? Need that ASAP. I don't know. Let's see. Clint Street Machines. Also, do you suppose electronics have improved to the point where electronic carbs could be a thing again? Yes, that's what your sniper fuel injection system is.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, it's the evolution of the electronic carburetor. Let's see here. John Wilburn saying, I want to see the VRS 660 center squirter. They can call it the Casper model.
All you got to do is put the link in the linkage to make it 1-to-1, and there you go.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can change the linkage, the progressive rate on it.
Huh. Oh, Max Wedge Dick Dastardly saying, I bought 2 new 750 Carters for mine. I spent all I'm spending on new carbs. They cost more than most of my cars cost.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and that's I don't even know. I'm assuming since he put 750 Carters, it must be a rebuilt original Carter. So if it's a max wedge, he's got that 2 Carter setup on there. Let's see. Clayton's toolbox here. How could I make an Offenhauser single carb tunnel ram work? I know it's not ideal. I would love some input from both of you guys on how to make it better. It's for a 425 olds and a light car.
You need a plenum shaped like a trapezoid at the top. If you ever look at like the sheet metal versions, like the old school Offenhauser had the carb here, plenum, then the runners go straight down. So basically, the fuel has to make two 90-degree turns down into the intake.
Yeah, but in the center, it's going to get all the fuel,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's exactly right.
So it's air and fuel is just like anything else. It takes the path of least resistance, right? So the 4 cylinders directly below that carburetor are going to get freaking dumped. What you need in there is like I think the only way to really make that work is kind of like a reversion plate, which is going to freaking restrict fuel and airflow horrendously. But you put a plate where they overlap each other like this, where it would actually have an opportunity to mix the air and fuel as it's going down.
If you're going to use that intake as the way it comes, put a very tall spacer and taper the spacer down like this right here on the bottom side and roll the edge. And I would actually put, do you remember the turtles?
Oh, and the bottom of the intake. Yeah.
I would put a triangle in the bottom of the intake so when the fuel comes down, it has to hit that and go out. I mean, once again, you're kind of putting a Band-Aid on something, but, you know, it could be done.
You know, if you have the top with the single 4-barrel, couldn't you just literally take 2 aluminum spacers and weld them to the top of that thing and put 1 barrel over each individual cylinder? I think that would probably work better.
Let's see here. I'm going to see if I can do the John Wilburn here. See if I can find it. And it will kind of explain what needs to be done here.
Actually, you know what I think would work? Oh, yeah.
That's kind of the only way that you can make that deal work is raise the plenum up really high and angle it downward.
You know, I'm kind of wondering if, let's see here. I have an idea. Let's see. I do have an idea, though. Have you ever seen how a Rover 4-liter intake manifold looks for EFI?
No.
Okay, there's something interesting and neat about it. Let's see if I can find a good picture over here real quick. What I need is a full one. What's that?
Let's see here.
Okay.
What'd you find?
All right. What in the world was that? Okay. All right. Let me see if I can post this up here. All right. Present. Share screen. All right. Sharing. I don't know if you can see this. Can you? Okay.
I can.
All right, you see how the Rover 4-liter intake manifold, it's made for fuel injection. It works here, but you have the big upper cover right here. So you have a lower intake manifold and then the big upper cover. If you see what's underneath the cover, let me pull this up. Okay, did that work? Can you see it?
Yeah,
okay,
see it.
you see how those tubes right there, each one of them has a tuned length based on where it's at?
I do see that.
Okay, that's inside of an EFI intake manifold. I wonder if something like on that tunnel ram, something like this, where you could stagger the size of the of the tubes inside, like say you make something inside that tunnel ram, because it's got a removable top. I think if it's a single plane or if it's that single 4-barrel, doesn't it have a removable top? But if you could stagger the size of those air inlet tubes, it would put more signal on the carburetor directly in the center. But if you shorten those up and then lengthen these ones on the end, wouldn't they'd be the closer signal to the carburetor?
The only thing that you have to be careful with doing that is
It's going to be one cylinder's going to be
fuel.
rich and
yeah.
especially at low RPM, it would be pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was interesting when I was looking at this intake manifold the other day on how intricate this thing is, for what reason. You know, it literally has that top sitting on it, and it has those. The only thing I could think of is those are all individually tuned lengths based on the length from the port to here. So the center ports being the closest, then have the longer piece, so that all of them have a tuned length.
Gotcha.
I don't know. All right. I think that the best way to make that work is if you can.
Yeah. It'll take
right.
some experimentation.
Let's see. Fabrace Mod repeats saying if all the bleed circuits are interlinked, the carb should react pretty instantaneously. And that's what Andy was saying that Professor P was seeing on his Slant 6.
Yeah, there's a lot of crosstalk there. Where
2 quadrajets on a tunnel ram, a question nature has never asked for reason. That would be bog central. It really would. Let's see. Buick Smith saying it wasn't a tunnel ram, but there used to be a 70 Buick race car in the 80s that had a 455 with twin 800, or was it 850 Rochesters? They're probably 800s, but Offenhauser makes that intake manifold too.
really?
Yeah, two quadrajet 2-barrels, or 2 quadrajets on. It's not a tunnel ram. It's not even a high rise.
It's just a low rise type deal.
Yeah, dual quad.
Cool looking intake, I bet.
Yeah, it is cool. The only problem is it doesn't really make any power over an aftermarket intake.
Right.
Let's see. Dakota's timeout saying that he just bought a set of perfect blue anodized Moroso valve covers for a small block Chevy.
Man,
So-
that's awesome. I remember when those were the rage.
I'd love to find some for I want some for a Cleveland.
Yeah.
But they're hard to find, and most of those were gold.
Yeah.
For the Clevelands. But Max Wedge Dick Dashley says 2 quadrajets would be double star for gas top end. Mine always flooded at idle and ran dry top end. Let's see. John Wilbert saying if he had a pair of Predator carburetors, I would have to build a monster truck to go under them with 23.5 to 1 gears. Drivability won't matter. Let's see.
There you go, John. That's the way you think.
Dakota's timeout saying carburetors are too expensive. I just duct tape a hose on the intake and feed a gas bottle in while I'm driving. So,
I have cranked an engine without a carburetor on it before. Have you ever done that?
no, I imagine a race to the moon.
Yeah, it will. In fact, it was a 383 Mopar that I did that on.
Oh, it didn't blow up?
No.
Let's see. Dakota. Oh, they're just laughing at his comment. Okay. Dakota's saying that my dad had a small block Ford tunnel ram with a top for 1 carb. Yeah, I thought that some of those Some of the tunnel ram manufacturers made that where you could buy,
They
you
did.
could get one.
Yeah.
So John's saying that, in other words, turn the single quad tunnel ram into a big single plane. I
Yeah,
think that's
that's
what it
talking
sounds
about
like.
that coyote picture that I showed.
Yeah. Let's see. Clayton's Toolbox is saying, what size carb would you use on the 425 tunnel ram with single carb, 850 CFM, annular boosters?
Bingo.
That's
That's what I
yeah,
would
that's
do.
probably a good start.
Yeah.
Generally the rule of thumb is take your cubic inch and double it, and that's where you should start.
Yeah.
So, and then with annual boosters, it's actually going to distribute the air a little bit, or the fuel a little bit better in that.
It's going to have a
single.
better fighting chance. Let's say
Yeah.
that.
Let's see. Dust Double Garage was a good starting port for my 660s on my tunnel ram 360 as far as jets and idle mixture screws.
You need to have 30 thousandths idle feed restrictions in the metering blocks. And your mixture screws are probably going to be about 3/4 of a turn out. If you don't have 4-corner idle, you'll end up at about a turn and a half out. But you definitely need to lean out the idle feed restriction because the stock 660 idle feed restriction is almost 40 thousandths. Huge. I mean, it is so rich, it's unreal.
Huh. Fab Race Modder Pete saying there used to be an intake with internal stacks like that for the 4-valve Cobra engines. I wonder how that
They
thing
did.
would have ran.
Oh,
You
it
seen
was
one?
bad. Yes, they are bad.
They had the tune runner thing like that Rover?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
The 5.4 Cobra R intake is like that.
Huh.
In 2000, you know, the funny Cobra R that had the wing on the back.
Right. You know what? I know why they did that. Because if you remember, did you ever do EFI 5-liter Ford stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You remember if you had a Cobra intake manifold on that sucker, it was always like cylinder number 1 and 8 that was lean. Always.
Yep,
And we used to
always.
run, like say you were running 24 pound per hour injectors, in cylinder 1 and cylinder 8, I'd have a 30.
Yeah,
Right.
that
And
was a common thing.
Yep. And that's the only way to really make them run right, to where you have power on all 8 cylinders. Otherwise, 1 and 8 was lean. And when you were screwing with nitrous and 1 and 8 being lean, that was not a good combo.
You always checking those plugs.
Yeah. Let's see. I don't see any other questions. Oh, here's Dakota just asked a question. Do Holly double pumpers need the same PV front and back? They
It depends
generally,
on what you're doing. The reason why most double pumpers don't have a rear meter power valve is because it's on the highway. But there are certain situations, like if you're doing autocross or circle track racing, where you're not at full throttle, like you're coming off a corner, you'll need the extra fuel, and that's when you would want the power valve in the rear. You see what I'm saying? To
right.
keep it from going lean. So 90% of the time, you don't need a power valve in the rear unless you're doing something like that.
Right, and drag racing would pretty much just take that rear power valve out and
Yeah,
block it off. Okay. Okay, well, I guess we're kind of caught up on the chat now. I was looking at this Rover intake the other day. That's what
That is a pretty cool looking intake of it.
Well, here's something that's interesting. Let me go click on that thing for a second.
So why don't you get one of those and build like a nasty EFI and put standalone EFI on it?
Well, what I figured out was I make spacers to put a 215 intake manifold on a 300.
Okay.
Right? 300 Buick. This is a 215 intake manifold, and my spacers would work on this, and I could put it on a 300 Buick and then make my own big single plane. And what I would do is, if you look at the to where the throttle body is at. It's got this weird Lucas throttle body built into the intake manifold here. But the best thing to do is just run that across a bandsaw, cut it off, and let it fall on the ground. And then weld a flange on there to put an LS style throttle body on it. Just cut it right here, right? So, and then you'd be good to go, I'd imagine. But I thought there would be also an even neat way to, pretty neat way is if you bought 2 of those Rover 4-liter intakes, the upper intake manifold, and then that box, you split it long ways with a bandsaw and then weld it back together and put 2 of those throttle bodies on it, one on each side.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because then it won't have a... Right now, all the air is coming in on one side, right? And that's the problem. It's going to be those center 4 cylinders are going to get tons of air, and the other ones are going to not. So those are going to be really lean in the center and really rich on the ends. But if you put 2 throttle bodies on it, I think it's going to have a better opportunity to distribute the air. Or, actually, you know what?
Super cool.
Or you just make the box and then put the throttle bodies directly on top and get 2 of them.
Yeah.
So,
either way, it would be really cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to get rid of that, I guess. But yeah, I was looking at those and they're about $250 on eBay. And so I figured the EFI a 300 Buick, $250 intake manifold and a couple $100 spacers, and bang, you're done. So let's see. All right. Colin Tebow's asking, what do you guys think of New Guy Garage's JB Weld carburetor?
Well, I mean, that's great for airflow, right? If you're trying to smooth all that for airflow, but from my experience, people look at the wrong end of the horse when it comes to that stuff. It's about how well you can meter the fuel. You can always get the extra airflow, but getting the fuel metering perfect is where power is at.
Yeah, especially if you just clean up the airflow coming in and you do nothing else to the carburetor, it's going to be lean at that point then. So you're going to have to readjust your tune.
A lot of different things you got to consider. And a lot of people don't realize it's a domino effect. If you change one thing here, you may change 2 or 3 things down the way. That's about like that crazy carburetor that I'm doing for the 318 build. The BBD 2-barrel, making a monoblade, getting rid of the 2 barrels and making a monoblade, completely eliminating the booster, making it a down like a straw type booster. When you start doing that stuff to get airflow, it changes how the fuel is metered, and that can be either really good or really bad.
Okay. Buick Smith is asking a question here. Andy, what do you think of the carb cheater by Thunderhead 289?
I think it's interesting. Here's where I kind of take issue with it. And you have to, I don't know if I can convey this in the words of what's in my head, but let's say we have a target air fuel ratio of 14-1. I'm just going to use that. Well, based off of the volume of fuel, I can have a 14-1 over here, or I can have a 14-1 over here. Does that make sense?
Not really. I'm not following.
Basically, what you're doing is you're using that solenoid valve to target a specific AFR ratio.
Right. It's just what it's doing is it's a regulated vacuum leak. Yeah.
It's a regulated vacuum leak. And so at the end of the day, I mean, does it work? I don't know. I'd like to try one just to get my hands on it. You know.
I just would hate to see what happened when that thing stops working. Period. Like,
Well, the caveat to that is you have to be pretty close with the carb tuning for it to even really work.
right. And I think when he started on was when he put the lawnmower carb on the 289, and
That was
what he
really
found
cool, by the way.
what he found out was the velocity of air through there allowed it to meter fuel really well, and that's because all that air was being shoved through that one little barrel,
Yeah.
right? So, Aunt DC, and any thoughts on fuel draining all the way back to the fuel tank? I've got some that can sit for weeks and be fine, and some that don't. All carb and mechanical pump. Well, one, I'm going to tell you, your needle and seat's leaking, because generally when the bowl is full and the float comes up, the needle will sit down in the seat. And even when the car is not running, it'll just stay full like that, and it doesn't allow fuel to drain back from the bowl of the carburetor. But the other thing is, generally when it gets down to your pump, the pump's got a check valve in it, and it shouldn't allow fuel to drain back at all. I'll tell you what I think you're probably seeing here. When they started putting ethanol in fuel in like about 2001, 2000, somewhere around there, that I've noticed that stuff evaporates out of the bowl of the carburetor through the vent like almost immediately.
Yes.
Like within a day or two.
Yeah, it really does.
And I'm wondering if that's what you're actually seeing. That's it sits for a week. Now, if you run, I wonder if you ran I don't know if you can buy it where you live at, but here where I live, I can buy gasoline with no ethanol in it. And
we can too.
Can you? And
Yeah.
I'd like to see what happens if you just do that. And does it still have the same problem? Because it won't evaporate out of the bowl, not near as fast as the ethanol fuel.
Right.
Okay. And I think that's about it. So, Andy, you're going to be doing some 4R100 swap on Casper here soon, right?
Cannot wait. That's going to be a game changer for Casper, because what that means is I can go to the track, not have to worry if the pin is hanging halfway out of the grenade, with the C4. I'll be able to drive it comfortably on the interstate, 70, 80 miles an hour, because the cool thing about the Casper-Matic is it's overdrive, but I still have lockup capability with the torque converter. So super cool stuff.
Well, what's the overdrive on the E4OD or 4R100? Is it 0.67 to 1 or is it 0.76?
Yeah, it's 0.67, I think.
Yeah, that's super steep. Like AOD had that thing, same gearing, where it was like if you had running a 5-liter Mustang and you had a 5-speed, you would run like a 373 gear, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you had an AOD, you'd run a 410 gear,
right?
And it was still virtually the same, except for the AOD having that super steep overdrive really helped them out on the highway.
Yeah. So that's going to be pretty cool, though, going to see Mr. Cope and picking up the transmission, which should be in the next couple weeks, I would imagine.
As fast as he puts things together, I bet you that E4OD is already done.
Oh, it's done sitting on the table. It's just waiting on the valve body to get to him, the production units.
Oh, I thought he had already had the valve body, was waiting on those separator plates.
That was the prototype.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's got to have one cut then. All right. Let's see what else there is. Buick Smith is saying I can blue my own aluminum parts. Look for a product called Royal Blue EG. It is a blue dye used for aluminum.
Did not know that.
Me neither.
It's like bluing gun parts, I guess.
Well, they would look pretty cool.
They really would.
Yeah. I mean, I could literally make a whole entire Buick V8 with almost aluminum cylinder heads and intake and timing cover and all that stuff would be aluminum. That's pretty cool. Okay. Michael Schmidt, Andy, thinking of single blade mod is cool, but it's really not practical for anyone other than a top-notch carb tuner. I would consider ditching that plan. His 2 cents.
You're exactly right, but I want to see how much power we can make through the BBD. Now, somebody that's using common sense would put a 500 CFM Holly 2-barrel on it and be done with it.
Yeah, and that's been the racer's choice for the 2-barrel classes in stock cars for a long time.
Yeah.
So here's something that's funny. Junkyard D showed up and then put everybody's name all in one big long thing here. So you're in there somewhere. And
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks for showing up, Junkyard D.
Now think of how much time it took to do all that.
Yeah. Well, then he threw us in here, and Dallas and Andy. Yep.
Yep, we're here.
Yeah,
Awesome.
that was one of the things that I always found in all of our, not necessarily just the lives, but the videos, that our community all pretty much sticks together, and everybody shows up and greets each other. And you go somewhere else, and it's like, meh, nobody cares, nobody calls or nobody can has any conversation with anybody or says hi or nothing like that. So, yeah, that's what's cool about it.
It's bizarre to me, that I guess because we have this community and it's so cool, but like you would think people would interact like that in other realms. You know what I'm saying? But they don't.
No, and I don't know why. I mean, I guess when our Wednesday night tech talk kind of separated from where it was to where it is now, I guess a lot of that group just came along with it. So, and that's the top 10%. So, Clayton's Toolbox. I'm new to Power Glides. What can you share about them?
I'm strong as an ox.
Well, I don't think it's the strong. Okay, any transmission, they're all kind of the same thing. It's gear multiplication, right? So it's multiplying your torque by the gear ratio. The higher the gear ratio, which is numerically lower, the more torque any transmission is capable, right? So let's say you look at stick shift racing. This is where you see it the most, okay? In stick shift racing, you get a 306 first gear, okay? That transmission might be only capable of 500 foot-pounds of torque, okay? But if you were to change that first gear to like a 255 first gear, now that same transmission, you haven't done anything to the case, anything else. It's just first gear is now went from 306 to 255. It's now capable of like 850 foot-pounds of torque, and that's because the multiplication, the multiplication of the torque inside the transmission allows it the ability to split the case at a much lower, torque level, because it has so much more multiplication, right? So if you look at a 306, say your engine makes 500 foot-pounds of torque, and you got a 306 first gear, you're essentially making 1,500 foot-pounds of torque coming out the tail shaft of that transmission. That 1,500 foot-pounds of torque would split that case just wide open, right? And it's all happening right there. Now you go to that 255 first gear. The math is not so easy for me, but let's just say you're making 1,200 foot-pounds of torque, right? Instead of 1,500. And so it's 300 foot-pounds of torque less. That's why.
With a Power Glide, the converter is key to that. Since you only have 2 gears, the converter is a lot more crucial.
Yeah, and rear end gear is generally something that has to change as well.
Yeah.
If you want to have the same kind of ETs. But the Power Glide, they're simple. That was made in the 50s, right? That transmission is so simple, and that's what makes them great, is that without all that torque multiplication, they last forever. But I'll tell you, I was crewing on a guy's dragster when I lived in Sydney, Australia, when I was in the Navy there. I wasn't in the Royal Australian Navy. I was in a U.S. Navy exchange program. But I lived in Sydney, and I crewed for a guy. He had a front engine dragster. And we had it was a 355. It had like a 1071 or 871 blower on it, and ran on methanol, and it made like probably 1,000 horse, 900 horsepower, somewhere around there. We ended up blowing the motor up, and we took the motor apart, started rebuilding the motor, and he's like, man, we're gonna go 408 cubic inch or 406, I think, maybe, 30 over block. And he's like, I'm gonna take the tranny and get the tranny rebuilt. And we took it into the shop, and the guy calls us like, hey, what's this out of? Like a 65 Nova? And we're like, no, this is out of a front engine dragster. It still had the stock GM clutches in it.
Really?
Yeah. And I couldn't believe that the thing was still operating like virtually a stock transmission.
That's insane.
But if you think about it, the weight of the car, which is nothing,
Bingo.
right? And so then you got a rear end gear that's probably like a 410 or 373.
Yeah.
And that's virtually what was the saving grace of that transmission, is the weight of the car was nothing. And the rear end gear made it easy to move the vehicle. So it didn't really strain the clutch as much. But I was just surprised. He called us and like, man, this thing's a bone stock power glide. It's like,
I will say this: when we went from the C4 to the Power Glide in Mustang versus 40 passes changing clutches, we went 4 years without even taking the transmission out once we put the Glide in. Check the fluid, still red, let it roll. No problems.
well, power glide is, I don't know what is going to end up happening with my T-Bird, because it's just getting to the point where the C4 can't handle it anymore. It starts flaring up in high gear. Matter of fact, I only ran about 6 passes at No Name Nationals, and it got to about the 5th one, and I heard it start flaring up really good. And that's just the downfall of that C4. But I don't want to go to a Turbo 400, because the Turbo 400 is going to eat up 30, 40 more horsepower I don't have to spare.
Right.
So,
you know what the gear for that is?
Power glide.
Nitrous. Lots of nitrous. You'll make up for that 30 horsepower. You'll never miss it.
Yeah, here, let's just add 300 more. You'll never notice.
Never notice.
Yep. Well, that might be the case. I don't know. All right. Clint Street Machines. Andy, I have a pair of 6109 Hollies on my 400 Mopar or moped. Any advice?
That's on a moped. Watch out.
Yeah, any advice for a starting setup? I got to rebuild them anyway. They're 750 double pumpers.
Yeah, those are actually pretty cool carbs. Honestly, I would rebuild them stock. The only thing I would do is the same thing I told Dust Devil. I would change the idle feed restrictions, put something around 30 thousandths in there for the idle feed restrictions, and tune from that point.
Oh, you know what? I got the biggest tip for everybody when you're talking Hollies and tuning Hollies. First things first. Make sure the float level is correct, right?
Absolutely. That's basics 101.
I learned that the very hard way. Like, the sight glass is on there, so if I can see it in the middle, it's good to go. No, that's too high. It should be just like a regular Holly where it's right at the bottom of that sight glass.
Yeah.
Right? That's where your screw would normally be at. And the way you were supposed to do the screws, and I don't know why they ever went to the sight glass, because the screw was so easy. But when you take that screw out, all you're supposed to do is lean on the fender of the car. And if it dribbles fuel out, that's perfect.
Good.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, John's saying spending 5 minutes greeting everybody at the beginning of each live stream, it's very important. And it goes a long way. Michael Schmidt says, suspension tech. Andy, what suspension mods did you have to do to Casper to make it hook and transfer weight? It's still got leaf springs?
It does. And it's still factory stock suspension. The only thing that I've done is put Caltrax on it. The engine is set back about 1.5 inches from stock location, and front springs have been cut 1.5 coils. But outside of that, that's it.
Well, and you're going to have it at No Name Nationals this year too, right?
Mhm.
All right, so everybody will get an opportunity to actually look Casper
Yeah.
over.
The only thing that I'm going to do different between now and then is it's going to have a set of real drag shocks on it, on the rear, because it's getting too much separation in the rear too fast.
Oh,
So I don't know what's going to happen when I leave off of a trans brake. That's just something I'm going to have to do the learning curve with.
well, the trans brake makes them hit harder.
That's
But
right.
the good thing about the trans brake is you don't have to use it.
I don't have to, but you know,
I don't have a trans brake in my T-Bird.
oh, you foot brake it still.
Yeah, I still foot brake it. Yeah. I noticed when you do the trans brake, it's hard on parts. See, I had just come from the nitrous world where it was like
Oh yeah,
nitrous. There's nothing like it. When it hits, when that stuff turns on, that solenoid opens up, and that super cold nitrous oxide comes in. It's like getting hit with a hammer in the back of the head when the car leaves.
there's nothing like it.
Yeah, and but there was also nothing like how it was smashing my wallet, because I went through AODs like M&Ms,
You
right?
told me that.
And the sad part was like the AODs were about $2,500 to have rebuilt. That was in the early 2000s, so I imagine it's probably like $4 or $5 now to have a good
Oh, every
AOD.
bit. Yeah.
And I did one of those super expensive AODs. It lasted,
Was
huh?
it an Intech or
It
was
was
it?
Lentec, yeah. And I
Yeah.
made it through half a season, and it started slipping and sliding. And I'm like, oh no. We got back to the pits, and all I did was pull the dipstick and smell it. And I knew she's toast.
Game
Right.
over.
And so I went to the junkyard the next week, and I just started pulling AODs out of, back then, Mustangs, Cougars, Thunderbirds, Crown Vics,
Everything
and
had 'em.
Town Car had AOD. The trucks had AODs, so you could go get them. They were $70. Pull them at the pick apart, and you just go there, smell the fluid. If it didn't smell all burned up, you just dropped the train, went
Put it
racing.
in, race
Yeah.
it for the weekend, and take it back out.
Yeah, and then you go get another one for $70, and that's how I limped it along for a while. And then I finally just plopped the money down for a full race C4. But had I known that the full race C4 had a limitation of about 600 horse, and then they start having serious problems in high gear because it can't apply the clutches fast enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would have probably went to something different back then. But back then would have been really hard to put a turbo 400 in one. Nobody made a bell housing.
No,
Yeah.
not back then.
Yeah. So I don't know. I might see if I can come up with a switch pitch turbo 400 with the 2-speed torque converter, and I'm going to try that out in there if I go to a turbo 400.
That would be cool.
Yeah. I have two different stall speeds on a switch. That'd be pretty bitchin'. So let's see. It's 38 POS Racing said there were at least 3 generations of the Power Glide.
I can
I
imagine.
didn't
So
know.
they started out cast iron, then they went to aluminum.
But then
So,
they had no cooler the first
Yeah.
couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Auto Salvage Outlaw saying, Andy, that's the reason I like a C6 in a Ford truck or car.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see.
It has the same issue as a Turbo 400. It just eats a bunch of power.
Yeah. And
Which
then
is
I
what
think a
I'm getting ready
C6
to
always
do right
runs
now.
hot, right? Doesn't
Yeah.
a C6 always run hot compared to the rest of transmissions?
I don't know. I've never had that issue, but basically the 4R100 is a C6 with overdrive.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It was the first version of the heavy duty overdrive for Ford.
Yep.
Let's see. John Wilbur says AOD is a different flavor of 700R Ford. Ditch 'em quick.
Ditch them quick.
Yeah. Well, so Buick Smith, Dallas, can you tell me again what motor and frame mounts you used in that burb again? Accidentally deleted it. All right. So I used 1973 full size B body GM frame mounts. And then I used a regular Buick big block motor mount, and it's moved back to the rear holes. But those frame mounts, all I did was move them from driver side and passenger side, I swapped them, and they're mounted backwards. Okay, and the holes line up in the 73 through 91 GM square body trucks. You got to drill one hole to make the thing fit, and then it just falls right in like it's factory.
That's a pretty cool tip.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure it out, but luckily this thing came with a turbo 400, so all I did was put a motor and transmission in there, centered it based on the turbo 400, and then I just looked for what holes I had lined up.
Right.
And it was the square body GM trucks. One, it was the longest lasting run for any GM truck, but they also had a diesel Oldsmobile option in the 70s. So the cross member in those is drilled for any GM motor mount.
That's pretty cool to know.
Yeah. So Buick Big Block in there was like literally a piece of cake once I figured out what holes it fell in. Let's see. John Wilburn says Dallas needs a Ford balancing for 904. No, I'll pass. I'm going to go with something that's going to handle some power, and I don't want to do a glide because it's going to slow the car down.
Yeah.
But I don't know, if I do a glide and a bunch of nitrous, it won't slow it down.
Now, I don't know about that, Dallas, and I'll tell you the reason why. What's the fastest ET that you've been with the C4?
Well, fastest with the C4 so far is right now what I ran at the No Name National is like 612.
Okay. We were running 580s when we took the C4 out of the Mustang, right? Put the glide in, and we went and run like 568 first pass.
Same rear gears?
Yeah. 430s.
Okay.
So I'm saying that converter does a lot to make up for that first gear ratio.
Yeah. Yeah, but you go from like, see, right now I got like a 4800 stall. It probably is going to be like a 5500.
Probably. But the thing about it is, too, it calms down the launch of the car, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
It
that's one thing I do like about it, though. Gosh, it leaves awesome, but it's hard on the... if you ever watched the car, it doesn't do that. I worked on the suspension a lot. It actually just does like the 80s Pro Stock where it'll lift that one driver's side tire and it'll carry it like 330 foot, right?
So I think like the 80s Pro Stock cars were just so awesome when they did that. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I think that was my favorite era of Pro Stock. I mean, in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Pro Stock was the bomb in the 80s, man. It was like literally everything. And, it was probably a little bit better in the late 70s when they first came out with the Lenco. And everybody was running the Lenco. But before the cars became tube chassis. So you had like the wire car? You had the Motown Missile, the Challengers that they had.
Yeah.
Man, there was some really neat stuff that came out around that time. Glidden and Allen had, they were in a Mustang and then a Pinto.
Awesome stuff.
Let's see. Danny Boyd saying there was also a manual power glide. You had to shift low to high yourself.
Really? I did not know that.
It's pretty interesting. And I could see it like manual automatic transmission. I mean, it just a clutchless manual. Where you think about it, it's simple because your valve body would be no check balls or be nothing.
Yeah.
Huh. So Dizzy Izzy saying there's a local Facebook marketplace here in St. Louis. Guy has a 94. I'm sure it's limited slip rear Dodge pickup with 410 gears, $400. You should go snap that up. That's a pretty good price. If it's got a limited slip and 410 gears, it's probably worth about $1,500.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see here. All right, Michael Schmidt saying 80s Pro Stock was far superior to watch than the big boy dragster and funny cars. I agree. Because you had, not only did you have, I wouldn't say it's the pinnacle, because it wasn't really the pinnacle of Pro Stock. Well, I guess maybe it was.
Maybe it was.
All the way through the 80s, because after the 80s, well, I mean, of course you had the 90s, but the 90s Pro Stock didn't have the flash and flare of 80s.
No.
In the
it really
80s,
did.
yeah, the neat thing about the 80s and Pro Stock was, one, these were engines that were virtually based on factory production stuff, right? DRCE, the drag race competition engine from General Motors, was about the only one that was drag race only.
Right.
The Dodge was factory Dodge based block. The Ford was based on the big block Ford, the 385 series.
That's exactly right.
And then these cars, if you ever watch any of the like the old Diamond P stuff on YouTube for 80s Pro Stock, you'll notice that the engine RPM when they stage them is like varying all over the place. And that's because they didn't have any rev limiter, none.
Oh,
Okay. And they would hold it with their foot and inch the car in with that Linko, just easing out on the clutch.
yeah.
Okay. And then
How-
what, right. And then what they would do was they would push the clutch in, and as the lights, because you're on a pro tree, so as soon as the second car goes in and all four stage beams are lit, you would hear them just go to the moon. And that's because they just pegged the gas on the
They
floor.
just mad at it.
You
Send it
had
to
to
the
have some
moon.
cojones. Man. But that is my favorite era of Pro Stock. And, there's a video circling around here on YouTube where, see, my old man was big into Buicks, and that's where I learned all this Buick stuff. And that's when Buddy Ingersoll just showed up with this turbo Buick. And
Oh yeah, everybody went
Ev-
crazy.
yeah, they were freaking trying to rule book this guy to death. And he's like, look, my car is the only one you can go down and buy one at the dealership. And it was like, he's got a good point.
What are you going to say to that?
Yeah. All right, Buick Smith, you could put a full manual valve body in a Super Turbine 300 switch pitch. It used the same valve body as the Turbo 350, if I remember right. I believe that to be true. And right now I have a Super Turbine 300, a 65 model switch pitch in my garage. And what I'm looking at right now is I'm wondering if the case is close enough, if it could be modified to put Turbo 350 clutch assemblies in it and have a 3-speed switch pitch Turbo 350. So
That would be different.
yeah, I think the switch pitch is the untapped resource of, like, if you were to really take this on a big scale, the switch pitch Turbo 400, any Turbo 400 can be a switch pitch. It's a variable vane torque converter, right? So what you do is you take the pump, the input shaft, the piston assembly from there's like it's like a solenoid piston that
Mm-hmm.
controls the switch pitch, right? You take that and you could put it in any Turbo 400. You could put it in a Chevrolet Turbo 400, a Cadillac Turbo 400. It doesn't matter. It was available on Buicks, Olds, and Cadillac as Oldsmobile was an option, Buick was an option, and then Cadillac it was standard on up until 67. But they took it out because GM was losing money on every single one of them they did. But here's what I think in today's market. You know how everybody's running these pro mods with their 2-speed Turbo 400s that they got a Reed case or a Rossler case or whatever they got, and they're tearing these torque converters out and they're changing the fins on them to get the cars to hook up. What if you already had a 2-speed torque converter, right?
Yeah. You saying take that technology, refine it to that level.
Right, and put it in pro mods today with a 2-speed torque converter. They're already using a Turbo 400.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be hard to take a regular switch pitch Turbo 400 torque converter, cut it open, put a billet front face on it, right? And then make that 2-speed setup work. And all it's doing is it takes the stator in there, and it's just like a helicopter where it has a piston assembly and it moves the vanes on the torque converter as it's going down the road. So you can literally throw that switch and that thing will go to high stall or low stall, whichever way you want to go. And it does it while it's running.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I thought it'd be neat to see what you could do with Pro Mod with a 2-speed Turbo 400 with a variable pitch torque converter on it. But the neat thing is, if you could figure out the range of which that thing moves, right? And what you do is you set it up on, like, you know how the nitrous controllers, they vary their pulse length,
Yeah.
right? If you could set it up to work with that solenoid, and you could vary the pulse length and slow up the engagement to where you have a range of stall speed.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah. Let's see here. Okay, Michael Schmidt. After the 90s, NHRA fell off the map, and I lived 20 minutes from Pomona.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, what was the term? Jump the shark? I think they jumped the shark right around it was when Austin Coyle retired, was around that time. 97, maybe. 96, 97. So that's when things started kind of going downhill, and it started becoming the one-party teams. It was like Don Schumacher owned every Top Fuel team there was.
Yeah.
And,
or like Elite Racing is right now. Elite has every pro stock car out there in the field.
right, and that's what NHRA was trying to get away from, was the Camaro stock class, right?
Yeah.
Or Pro Camaro, or whatever you want to call it. And I think what they did was, right before they went to fuel injection in 2011? So 2010, the Ford 385 series motor and the Hemi Dodge, they lumped so much weight on them that they couldn't even be competitive. And everybody, I want to say, what was that? Alan
Johnson.
Alan Johnson was the last Mopar holdout, right?
Yeah, he was.
And then the Ford contingent went away with, I remember watching a guy that
Jim
he used
Cunningham.
to run. What's that?
Jim Cunningham was the last Ford holdout.
He was the red Mustang, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. That car was originally built and ran, I want to say, for what used to be Pro 50 Mustang class. And when they tried it in the last attempt for Pro Stock, and I want to say the car was 2 or 3 tenths off. And no matter what, they couldn't make up the power. They couldn't make up the difference. And they just went by the wayside. And the same way with the Mopar. And what should have happened is, then when you only had 3 manufacturers in it anyway, you should have started cutting weight on something, right?
Well, and not only that, then they made a rule that kept the bore spacing where only GM engines could be legal. So, like, you couldn't run a 385 series big block Ford anymore because the bore spacing is bigger.
Yeah,
So I think 484 bore spacing.
I still think it should have been based on factory production engines, right?
Exactly.
And so what should have happened is, hey, Chevrolet, go ahead, show up with your LS, right? Ford, you got your Coyote technology. Mopar, you got your Hemi. Have at it.
That Factory X class, or what's the name of the?
Yeah, that was it, Factory X.
Yeah.
But see, that thing, like, literally, it was what Pro Stock should have been.
Mm-hmm.
But it evolved so quickly, and now it's to the point where it's going to be Pro Stock all over again in just another 2 years.
Yep.
So, yeah, what they should have done should have been naturally aspirated. I still think that they should have had the steel roof and quarters where you had to buy a body in white. You had to start with a body in white.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not a factory build. 2 chassis car from the start.
Yeah. Here, let's catch up here. Let's see. 1984, the DRCE, and thus started the decline until the end of carburetors in 2015. After that, I don't watch it. I haven't watched it in years. The thing I hated was it was becoming the white collar sport, and it was the guy with the most money. It sucked being the little guy, and you show up with your open trailer, and you're just having a good weekend and gonna have a good time, and here comes some dude that's got stacker motorhome, $1,000 grill, and he's got 5 cars entered, and they're all double entered, and you're like, golly, man.
That's the progression that we've seen in our lifetime.
Yeah. And I still like the little guy open trailer deal. I do.
Yeah.
Let's see. Colleen's saying that that's why she liked the Triumph Spitfire from Sick Week looks like crap and is stupid fast.
Blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, Ron. And I'm way behind. This is at 8:12, so we're 8 minutes behind. So Ron Ward's been here for a little while. He says WJ, Scott Jeffrey on, Larry Morgan, Daryl Alderman. Man, I'll tell you what. Oh, 80s Pro Stock. Alderman, when they banged the nitrous backfire off the starting line, and then it was all like, they're running nitrous, and nobody could find it. And then Billy Glidden built it into the chassis of the Bob Glidden car, and Bob couldn't find it. And he proved to him that it's easy to hide it. Man, those were the days. That was great.
Or you could be Jerry Ekman and put it in your oil pan and then have an explosion in the pits. You got banned for life.
Yeah, well, see, you had all these great guys in, let's see, Iaconio was one, right?
Yeah.
Who was the guy that died that drove for Chevrolet? He had the rear Morrison car.
Lee Shepard.
Yeah.
Lee Shepard was the man.
Man, he was the driver, dude.
Him and Glidden, man, that duel that they had is just unreal. It'll never happen again, I don't think.
Let's see. Okay. Buick Smith is saying the front half of the Super Turbine 300 case is the same as the Turbo 350. The back half is the same as a Glide. When I had mine rebuilt, they had to use a kit from each to get it done. So I'm going to do something with it. I'm going to do something weird. Matter of fact, Monday, I'm going to have 4 300 Buicks in my garage and 3 Super Turbine 300 transmissions. So I'm going to have to do something with 300s and switch pitch Super Turbine 300s. Okay. Oh, and John saying, yeah, the nitrous scandals of 95 and 97.
Mm-hmm. They were. It was on every magazine stand. You go to the grocery store, see the big old fireball coming out of the snorkel.
That big, it had the big Alf snorkel scoop on it with the fireball coming out. The where that went kind of haywire was 82. I think it was 82. The AHRA allowed Pro Stock. You could run nitrous oxide in a small block, or you could run a big block, right? And that's where your Pro Mod evolved out of, because guys like Animal Jim Foyer and Bill Kuhlman and all those guys used to run the UDRA, AHRA Pro Stock with nitrous stuff. And that's where Animal Jim got to be really famous. Cool. What's that?
I think that combination is really cool. Small cubic inch with nitrous versus
big cubic inch. And I want to say it was not just big cubic inch, it was unlimited big cubic inch, right? Yeah. So, and Animal Jim said there's one engine that loves nitrous more than any other, and that's a Cleveland Ford. Oh. Okay. Oh, was that 2016 fuel injection and Pro Stock? Nah, it was before that.
That sounds about right.
I was building my car at the time.
You got to think, it's almost, 8 years now?
Yeah. Let's see. HRA, was going to be your dream vision for? Now, originally, I just wanted it to be a place for the regular guy to race, because there was no regular guy races. You try to go to a bracket race, and they're all the freaking $1 million bracket race with a $100,000 buy-in, and the regular guy isn't going to race that. I just want to go race my car on the weekend and have some fun, and it wasn't happening. And the little guy was getting pushed out. And there was no class racing classes left for the regular guy.
Right.
There was none. And so I started doing class races where I was trying to build classes around regular guy stuff, right? And that was the first year I did it. I did a class called the GT class.
Mm-hmm.
The AHRA originally had a GT class way back when, which was kind of like super stock, okay? It'd be like stock eliminator and super stock kind of mixed in one before it went haywire. You couldn't back out the car. You had to have a factory chassis. And that was what I did for the GT class. The car had to be factory chassis with factory suspension pickup points. And the tire, the max tire was a 9x30, which is, if you think about it, 9x30 is the stock eliminator tire for NHRA. So you would already have a big, huge group of cars that would actually fit in this GT class. You could run, it was weight to cubic inch. You were limited, like how big it was is how much you had to weigh. And it just didn't go over well. There wasn't enough cars. And then what you get is you get the guys from, like, say, NHRA Stock Eliminator. They weren't going to come over because they liked being where they're at. They got $500,000 Stock Eliminator car.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Fab Race Mod Repeats asking.
Did you do the modified class one year?
I did Nostalgia Modified. I brought that back. And when I did the Nostalgia Modified rules, we had one race. There was 8 cars, I think. It wasn't bad for your first turnout. I mean, you're just trying to get cars at the track. And if you face it, like the reality of it is, modified production went away in 1981, right? And so a lot of these cars had been sitting in the garage for a long time, if they were still around, or some of them had been converted to bracket cars and stuff like that. And there was a lot of interest and there was a lot of people doing it. But then one guy that was doing it, he was doing a modified production thing where they're racing on an index, which is not modified. Modified was weight to cubic inch. It was the poor man's pro stock. And that guy went over to NDRL, Nostalgia Drag Racing League, and they picked it up and built a class exactly like the one I had. So, it doesn't matter. I just tried to make it a place for the regular guy to be able to race, because the reality of it is money is running the sport and sponsorship is running the sport. And what's happening is it's not so much, I mean, it's the sport I love. It's not so much that it's ruining it. What it's doing is it's killing the innovation. And it's eliminating the regular guy from innovating and showing up and just having fun. And then everybody else is like, how the hell is this dude winning? Because he innovated something around you. That's what it's all about. Innovation.
Yeah.
That's what drives it. You know?
You got to get outside the box.
So that's what I was trying to do, was provide a regular place. And what do I see for the future? I don't know yet. I'm still going through this divorce. And once this divorce is over with, I'll have an understanding of how much I have time and money-wise. I might get right back into it. I might just do something totally different. You know, I've actually kicked around the idea of, instead of going to all these bracket events all over the country and just putting money on top, that I'm just going to have 5 events.
There you go.
And I think what I'm going to do is, like, to tell you the truth, the one thing I would really like to do is I'd like to start this series thing that I called Sibling Rivalry. So you take all the manufacturers from, like, where I came up with it was that there's no real, the Buick Nationals is dying, the Oldsmobile Nationals is dying, the Pontiac Nationals is dying. But if we did the Sibling Rivalry where it was Buick versus Olds versus Pontiac versus Cadillac, right?
That would be pretty cool.
That would be kind of cool. And then you'd have all the siblings fighting it out. Chevrolet, they don't need one. They got the biggest freaking Chevrolet event there is in the world.
Yeah.
And that one's not hurting by any means. But Buick, Olds, Pontiac, and Cadillac would be kind of cool, because you'd technically have 4/5 of General Motors. Now, if you did one with Mopar and you did Plymouth versus Dodge versus Chrysler, I think that would be kind of cool too. But I don't know.
You know what I think's missing? I love Southeastern gassers. I love Sega. But you know what would be really cool is, like, if there was a junior fuel class to go on top of that. You know what I'm saying? Because it's cool to go watch the gassers, but man, it'd be cool watching people, injected nitro cars going down the track.
Well, I always loved, so junior fuel popped up in Southern California when, if you're not familiar with this history of Junior Fuel popped up in Southern California when the pros went on tour, which if you remember, the pros were just the regular guys from Southern California that were just running Top Fuel, right?
Yep.
And then when they went on tour around the nation, there was nobody racing any fuel classes. So CJ Pappy Hart came up with Junior Fuel, which limited him to 300 cubic inches or less. I think it's like 330 cubic inches or less. I think
Either way.
But it's just injected nitro. And the good thing about it is, one, the engines are affordable and buildable at home.
Yes.
Two, you won't blow them up every pass because they're not blown, right?
Yep.
They run high compression, a lot of RPM, and they're fun to watch. But you run them all season on the same motor.
Bingo.
Three, it is probably the dragster. I'm going to tell you something right now. It's going to hurt a lot of feelings. Is the cheapest way to go fast. It is the cheapest. That's why Don Garlis did it. He didn't have any money. You know?
That's how the rail became a thing anyways. They wanted to go fast. They wanted to go cheap.
That's it. So, I love Junior Fuel. I love the idea of Junior Fuel. The other thing that I like is that should have been, that never was Junior Fuel Altered, right? Because fuel altereds are fun to watch, but I tell you what, they are sketchy to drive and they are scary when you're like
all over the track.
Yeah,
like
and those things change lanes. They change lanes at the 1,000-foot mark almost every pass. A lot of them way back when used to have open rear ends so they could control the dang thing.
Yeah. I would love to see an organized junior fuel class.
Yeah.
That's what I would love to see.
I always wanted to do a junior fuel altered class. I thought that'd be so cool. Let's see here. Okay, let's catch up. All right, we're way behind. John Wilburn says, Superstock and Drag Illustrated had a great picture of Wayne County team's car with flames out the scoop. The team claimed it had a broken cam. Did anyone buy that explanation? No.
Nope.
Let's see. Dakota's timeout. Dallas, is that a stock Cleveland block in your Thunderbird? No, that is a Windsor block, and it's a Dart Windsor block. It's a big bore Windsor. It's got a 4 1/8 inch bore and a 4-inch stroke, and it's what they called way back in the day a cleaver. What you did is you took the best bottom end combination that Ford had, which was the Windsor family, and you put a Cleveland head on it, which was the best head that they had for a small block. And you had a cleaver. Now, Andy did even one up on that, where you do the hemispherical heads, the hammerhead heads.
Yeah.
And so now you got the best combustion chamber with the best port flow with the best bottom end, which is the Windsor family.
I love it.
Yeah. But that's what they call it. That's why it requires, like, if you ever open the hood of look under the hood of my T-Bird, it's literally like Cleveland intake with a bunch of spacers and a valley cover, and it just doesn't look right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of extra stuff in there that it doesn't necessarily need to have. But let's see, Buick Smith. And my heads are a head that was made in the early 2000s by a company called Airflow Dynamics, AFD.
Yeah.
I was stationed in Australia when they were new. And so what I always liked to do while I was stationed overseas or in another country or whatever, however you wanted to look at it, was, okay, you can't be in the United States going drag racing, but what can you do? What's the benefits of that country? And in Australia, the Cleveland is king. And when I was over there, those heads were brand new production. It's what's they call a SP4VR, right?
Yeah.
Where the designer of the cylinder head used to work for CHI. He went to CHI with a new, hey, this is a different layout. And CHI said, no, we don't want to do that. We're going to stick with our same 3V. We're going to put a bunch of money in the 3V, which is the 3V was the right thing to do because it's a street head.
Right.
But this was like an all-out race 4-barrel Cleveland head. And so this guy started making it himself. And the pattern maker from CHI went with him. And they started building these heads and have them cast in Australia. So that's the heads I bought. Well, about 5 to 6 years later, that dude sold out to some company that's in China, and they just mass produced these aluminum garbage AFD heads, and I don't know if you can even get them anymore. But
Right.
they were equivalent to like what they used to call it was a Ford Motorsports A3 head. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what they were. They flow like, I don't remember, 385 CFM on the intake side, something like
Yeah,
that.
they're bad. They're
Yeah.
bad units.
Yep. And they got 219 intake valves and I don't remember, some humongous exhaust valve. It was big money at the time. Okay, Buick Smith. Now, can you give us history? A quick history lesson. Is the AHRA older than the NHRA? No, the NHRA is actually a year older than the AHRA. What was the first track event for the original AHRA? The first event? Oh, I don't know. I'll tell you how AHR got started. Okay, so a guy named Jim Tice was the dude that actually started the AH. Well, he didn't start the AHRA. There's
He took
another
it
guy.
over. Well,
Right. There
right.
was the organization already existed in like Pennsylvania. Then Jim Tice got elected president and he moved it to Kansas, where this is where it pretty much resided until Jim Tice got pancreatic cancer and died. But what happened is Jim Tice went to an NHRA event when they had the U.S. Nationals in Great Bend, Kansas. And he spent 6 hours in tech and got treated like absolute dog shit when he got there. And he said, you know what, I can do better than this. So he picked up the AHRA and ran with the AHRA and built it into a competitive organization, because at the time, NHRA would, if you won top fuel, you'd win a case of motor oil, right?
Yeah.
That was like, or, like a free entry to the next race. You weren't getting paid nothing. So Jim Tice turned it into like profit sharing,
Right.
where you paid the big racers to win, right? And that's what Jim Tice did, and that's where he got famous from. So all the stuff that you see with the sponsorships and all that stuff, that originally started with the AHRA. But the AHRA had no money, so Jim Tice would do things like, hey, I need to run security at one of my races. So they'd hire the Hells Angels, and they'd give them like 2% of the gate, right?
That sounds like a good way to run it.
The Hells Angels was like the last dude you wanted at your drag race, right? But Jim Tice just did things that were a little bit outside the box and a little bit abnormal. And when you looked at the AHRA race card compared to the NHRA race card, you had like, let's just say Don Schumacher taking on TV Tommy Ivo. And you look at the AHRA race card and you're like, Don Garlitz versus Guy from Florida, right? It was not really but the AHRA paid more,
Yeah.
and that was the deal. And the first event, I don't necessarily know what it was. I mean, I didn't get any of the history with the association at all. This is all just stuff that I've read and tried to figure out. I picked up the logo and I just tried to run with it and make it for the regular guy, because I could see the regular guy was getting pushed out. But the problem was, the real problem was COVID-19. I mean, I was 2 years in to resurrecting the organization, and COVID-19 happened.
Right.
And then everything came to a lull, right? Nobody made any money. Nobody could do anything. And I just had money going out hand over fist. And you couldn't really do anything. And then after COVID-19, I started doing everything all over again. Well, generally, when you start a small business, what they say is rule of thumb: first 5 years is the telltale.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the hardest part. It's where you put on all the work, all the sweat, all the time, and that's what it literally consumed me. But I didn't have the first 5 years. I had the first two, and then start all over again, and then the next three, and then my wife wanted a divorce, so my life just went to crap, right? And I mean, there's still members, but I haven't asked anybody to renew membership. All I did was put a pause on everything so I could
Right.
figure out what was going on, and then I would move into, making a decision on what I wanted to do after that.
You
But
know
right
what's
now,
funny?
what's that?
I knew you before YouTube and
From AHRA?
from AHRA.
Yeah, you were one of my first members.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you heard about me, but
Yeah. I remember us talking on the phone, and I thought, and then YouTube happened, and I was like, wait a minute, that's Dallas Brown.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to a PRI. We made a big, huge, I just had a booth there, and that was it. We were just meeting people, but it made like this huge splash in the community
Yeah.
because I was taking NHRA races and I was putting bounties on top of them. Like I'd offer one if you win Super Gas at Pomona at the Winter Nationals and you had a stick shift, I'm paying you $10,000. Well, the NHRA was like, hey, man, how are you putting money on top of our race? And I'm like, are you having the race? Yeah. Are you having Super Gas? Yeah. Okay, then I'm putting money on it.
Bingo.
Right? Well, you can't do that. And I'm like, where does it say I can't do that? Right? And it was like a huge, all I was trying to do was think outside the box. My chances of paying that money were like 40 billion to 1, right? But everyone said it couldn't be done. I was full of shit. And here it was, June that same year, up in St. Louis, when they ran the Gateway Nationals. A guy wins Super Gas with a stick shift.
Really?
Right? Yeah. And so it proved it can be done, and all I was doing was playing the odds to get, everybody was talking about it. Right.
Yeah.
So, I got all of the publicity I needed and I paid nothing for it.
That's awesome.
But it was always about thinking outside the box. If you've ever had to start a small business and then let's just say you're going to open a fast food restaurant right now. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're going to sell burgers and fries. All right.
Yeah.
How long do you think your business would last? Probably not very long, right? So you better come up with some outside the box stuff that makes people want to go eat your burgers and fries over McDonald's, over, the Checkers, over Burger King. There's so many people in it. And that's the same way with the drag racing sanctioning bodies. But it was all about, I could see it was all about the money. The IHRA was falling by the wayside. The people that were running it were absolutely lost. Right?
Yeah.
And I tried emailing them like, hey, man, why don't we do something like this or that? And oh, dude, if you run your own organization, you can do that. You know what? Well, fine, I will. So I did. And I bought the name from a guy named Rod Saint, and he had a hard go at it. And he tried to go toe-to-toe with NHRA. I didn't try to go toe-to-toe with NHRA.
Right.
I tried to run my own stuff.
Find your lane and stay there.
Yeah. And I wanted to offer not burgers and fries. I was offering tater tots and hot dogs, right? Something different that nobody else had. Or it just shifted a little bit, something. But it just never really happened, and a lot of it was COVID. And then I got this divorce, which I call COVID 2.0 at my house. And that's
right. It works.
Yeah. I can't get ahead without getting kicked in the nuts, so I don't know what I'm going to do next, but right now I'm just doing Buick engines on the side and keeping the lights on. Yeah. Keeping the lights on and seeing my kids on the weekends. So, okay, Michael Schmidt, innovation, hoping that and thinking that will come back like the No Name Nationals and Andy's DV, Charlie's Mission Impossible, plus off-the-shelf prices are skyrocketing, so people will have to innovate again. And that's why, okay.
Yeah.
That's innovation is 100%. I'm so far behind now, we might as well forget about it. But innovation, I love the Buick stuff because there is no parts. You have to be a real hot rodder to make your own stuff, figure things out, and develop and build. When Pro Stock first took off, I'll tell you that, and this is a story, when Pro Stock first took off, the people that got left behind was AMC.
Mm-hmm.
And AMC built in the next 2 years one of the most robust pro stock programs in the world, right? And you know how they did it? They did it with one thing. They hired a driver and an innovator and a builder named Wally Booth, right?
Yep.
And he was the right guy for the job. And what Wally Booth did was he looked at the AMC, what do you got? Well, we got these engines that are, they're just like their cars. They're eclectic. They're weird. It's doing the same thing, but it's just different stuff. It's like a Buick with an oil pump on the front. So it had all the same oiling issues as the Buick, but it had cylinder heads that were like a Dodge. But if you've ever messed with big block Dodge, the cylinder heads, you get to a certain point and then there's no more going.
Yeah.
Right? Well, how do you make that run in pro stock where you're competing against Hemis and the 385 series canted valve Fords and Chevrolet 427 Porcupine motors? You got an AMC, which is a wedge head.
Yeah.
How do you run that? Wally Booth took that same, he got cylinder heads and he cut them longitudinally and he made them taller. Yeah. He made the ports taller. And he was the right guy for the job. He thought his way around the problem. And there, it's one of the, in my life, the true American story is the underdog that's willing to put in the time, the effort, to think outside the box. You squeeze every dime, right? AHRA for 5 years, I slept in the back of my truck at events. You don't believe me? You ask anybody that's been at those tracks. But when I owed them money, I was standing there paying them in cash or writing them a check right there. And they knew it was good. Mm-hmm. Right? But I skimped and scraped and did everything I could to make it work for the time I had. But that COVID thing really freaking killed me.
Yeah.
Because you can only start a business up once. So we'll see what happens.
You might be able to get second wind into it.
I haven't really lost my desire to do it. I just have realized that I got too many things stacked against me right now to try to do anything. So that's why I just figured I'd just leave it idle until I know what I have and then figure out where to go from there. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to try to catch up here. There's a lot of chat. I've been ignoring them. Let's see. Let's see. Bear Rose Garage. I love it when people tell you can't do something that you already did. I'm right there with you, Bear Rose. That's the true American story, right? They make it happen regardless.
Absolutely. See, and that's the whole reason why I went down the tunnel ram rabbit hole. People saying you can't run tunnel rams on the street. And then I'm like, it's no different than any other intake. Let's figure out why.
Yeah. Yep. And you
we have
because
a tunnel ram mafia and a cross ram cartel.
Yeah, well, and what's funny was the cross ram is the one that came out first, but the longer runners than the tunnel ram, and they ran those on the street from the factory.
Yeah.
So, so here's Fab Race Mod Repeat. This is Chris Cox at Northeast Dragway, Dallas. Pre-YouTube, his girlfriend Bubblegum found our website while seeking sanctioning bodies, and then they decided to give us a call. And Northeast Dragway was one of our tracks pretty much for almost every year. Once they found me, every year we did a contract with them. And it wasn't like I wasn't trying to bleed anybody dry or making big piles of money. No, I was nothing like that. It wasn't like that at all. I was literally just trying to make ends meet, and I was trying to provide something for the regular guy.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's see if I can catch up here. Oh, Professor P. Oh, yeah, he's in the... Yeah, what's up, suckers? I'm sorry, I'm way behind. I didn't catch up till just now. So, what's up, Professor P? Hope you enjoyed your car show. Let's see, Dean Stevenson. Same thing happened with the CHI built 2-valve or 2V classic inlines head for 200 and 250 Fords. The aluminum casting plant of U.S. production has killed off making them in the USA. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Let's see. The roadblocks are a son of a bitch, Dallas. I have no doubt you will make it happen in your time. I will. And this time I'm gonna do something a lot smaller scale, and I think with a lot more bang for the buck. Right? Something enjoyable. Like, John and I worked on No Name Nationals before No Name Nationals happened. I want to say John came to me with an idea in like October of 2021. We worked on it and then released the dates for the event on January 1st, 2022. I think that's right. Maybe it was 2020 and then 2021. I don't know. It all runs together for me. Anyway, we worked on it for like 3-4 months. And I'll tell you right now, when we announced that the event was happening, the coolest thing was we didn't have a trophy. We didn't have a name for anything. We didn't have events developed. We didn't have none of that stuff. And John was like, yeah, we got 9 months to get it done, man. Like, we'll make it happen. Don't worry about it, right? We didn't have anything finalized. We didn't have any idea what the heck we were going to do, really. We just had basic framework. Yeah, it worked great. So I figured if we can have some other events like that, not so much truncated in time frame, but I mean, events that are enjoyable and fun and people are willing to do it without even really having been to it, I'll tell you something that I've been kicking around for a while. Okay. How drag and drive is the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know what the downside to drag and drive is? The hotel rooms eat you alive, right?
Mm-hmm.
It takes a week to do it. What if you did, say, 6 tracks in 2 days? And I've been kind of kicking around an idea where you do multiple tracks the same day. But here's the caveat to it. You want to do a real drag and drive? We're going to do a real drag and drive.
That's what I'm doing in September.
Well, what I'm talking about is this. One event, one track might be a drag race. One track might be stop in a box. One track might be cone smashing. One track, might be acceleration, 0 to 100 back to 0, right? That's real drag and drive. That's a real street car.
Yeah.
Right? Not a drag car that you drive slowly on the street. That's not a street car.
That's why I'm taking Casper. Going to have us a convoy, and we're going to head west.
Yeah. Are you doing the 66?
I don't know what we're going to do yet. I'll figure out the route to get to Sykeston, so I'm going to drive it to the No Name Nationals, and then the following weekend I'm driving it to Bowling Green, Kentucky, and then coming home.
No trailer.
No trailer.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll have to trailer my junk, but I'll do that Ford thing with you up in Bowling Green, and I want to call out that guy that has he's got the 88 Thunderbird that looks like the Bob Glidden Pro stock paint job, but it's running the Coyote stock class motor.
That would be awesome.
Because we both run about the same ET, and I think it'd be kind of cool to call that dude out and do a best of 3 match race.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Let's see here. Okay, well, you know what? I missed some super chats. Dang. Okay, so Michael Schmidt says $20. Thank you, Mr. Michael Schmidt. Underdogs Unite. I'm still dicking around with flatheads. Picked up some new headers today. Hanging there down. It's an inspirational plan. You know what? I'm gonna make it work or I'm not. But there's nobody's gonna say that I didn't try. So.
And you know what? I want to build a flathead at some point. I'd love to build a flathead V8.
I think, flathead was the small block Chevy before the small block Chevy was the small block Chevy. So,
I just think they're cool.
Yeah. Let's see. Dean Stevenson as almost as if some big company is putting a stop on aluminum head production in the USA. I gave all my ideas to Mike W. at Classic Inlines to make head stateside, crying shame. Okay, I'll tell you something kind of cool here. I was kind of kicking around the idea of casting some stuff because I can't get anybody to cast stuff I want, right? It's impossible. And the aluminum has gotten so pricey.
Yeah.
But what I did find out is a scrap aluminum wheel at the junkyard is $45. And I go buy one aluminum wheel that's already really good alloy, melt that down, and cast something myself. Right? There's nothing stopping you to buy some sand and wood to make a box, and then a metal tamper, right? So I can tamper
That'd be
that.
pretty cool.
But I don't think it'd be too hard. Let's see. Bear Rose. Truth in that, Michael.
Rose.
Yeah, he sent $2, and he's saying that truth in that, Michael. That he's talking about the the underdogs, and it all started from the underdogs. I think that's the true American story.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, Rocky didn't do good in the movie theaters because he lost. Rocky did good in the movie theaters because it showed heart, and it showed inspiration, and it showed what it takes to do the hardest things in life, right? He set a goal, and that was the goal: is I'm going to go the distance with the champ, win, lose, or draw. I'm going the distance.
Apollo Creed's going down.
Yeah. Okay, so Dakota saying that would be awesome. It would be really level. He's probably talking about me doing that. I was thinking about having that dragon drive. I thought that would be so cool if you actually did multiple events. And you know what I thought one of them would be really cool as?
What's that?
You know George Ray's?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it'd be really cool to do a match race where you pair somebody up based on the other track's ETs. So you pick the cars that have the close ET, and you do George Ray's heads up, right?
That
Match
would be
bash.
amazing.
I think it would be cool.
But see, that's another issue I have with the Dragon drives. They get there and they're just running the clock to get their time slip turned in. It's not really a drag race.
No.
The stands aren't full. There's
Right.
nobody sitting there watching it.
Yep,
But
and that's where I thought.
if you did that and average everybody's times and pair them up,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that would be awesome to see.
Well, because it would be side by side drag race, and then they're already classed together, and then it's the best 2 out of 3. And I thought that would be bitching because you're at the perfect, like the pinnacle track to do a match bash heads up, no timers, no 60 foots, no track prep, just get it done.
Get it
Right.
done.
Yeah, it's the right place to do it.
That was a pretty cool track, man. You
Yeah.
know, when we was down there.
Colleen Tebow threw his $10. AHR must live on. Thank you, Dallas. Well, thanks.
That is awesome, Colleen.
Yeah. I don't, I think this is probably the most money I've got for, super chats. I think since we started this AHRA, Wednesday Night Tech Talk Live, but, we're actually almost out of time, Andy. That went by so fast.
That was quick.
Yeah. But that's where we're at, and what I'm going to try to do with AHRA, but we'll see how it works out. I want to thank Andy for coming on, filling in. You're not necessarily filling in. Andy's probably going to be on here quite often. I'm going to try to shuffle it around to where, just about everyone gets an opportunity to do some tech talk.
That'd be
especially
awesome.
Yeah, especially some technically inclined people. And I didn't even get to dig in on Andy's 4.6 mod motor knowledge. He's a fountain of wisdom on that thing. So
I love my mod motors. Don't tell nobody.
well, it was Detroit's best kept secret, the
It
90s.
was.
Yeah, I was floored when I heard about the cylinder head flow numbers on them, and you're like, how the hell with the bore that small? How?
Yeah, how?
Right? But other than that, is there anything you wanted to plug, Andy? You got a live coming up or a new video or?
No, just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and it was really a pleasure to be on here with you. I appreciate the
thanks.
invite. So that's pretty cool stuff. We have the greatest community ever.
Oh, we do. Yeah. And they're tight. That's why they greet everyone when they come on, right? Because they're actually happy to see everyone.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Other than that, though, I think that's going to wrap it up for Wednesday night, unless somebody has one last, hurrah, last ditch effort, the Hail Mary of questions for the evening. But Mohawk 62 saying, very interesting live tonight. Thanks, Dallas and Andy. Have a good night, everyone.
That's right.
Yeah. So we'll see you guys next Wednesday. Maybe I'll have Andy on. Maybe I won't. I don't know. Maybe I'll have TV Tommy Ivo.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Or maybe me and Andy and TV Tommy.
Yeah.
So, all right. We'll see you guys next week. And thanks for coming out. Love to see y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.